Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Raise the Vibe with Liz. I'm your host, Liz Peterson, and today I'm going to be interviewing Karen Docherty. For those of you who aren't familiar with Karen, she is a medium, and since the discovery of her abilities, psychic medium Karen Docherty has worked tirelessly to bring the word of spirit to those who need it most. From the UK to the USA, from Asia to Australia, clients from all over the world meet with Karen to receive readings, enroll in mentorships, and share a space for discussions on the power of spirit. A woman with spirit and a breath of fresh air, Karen offers a contemporary approach to psychic work and mediumship based on traditional principles. Filled with love and compassion, she stands as one of the most reputable and skilled mediums in modern times. Karen, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Liz. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, lovely to host you. Yeah, thanks for reaching out. So for those of you who aren't, or for, those who aren't familiar with you, could you share a little bit about yourself and how you got into mediumship?
Yeah, of course. So I suppose it starts for me way back when I was younger, I was just a child, and I was aware of spirit. I was aware of, people from the other place, I used to call it, and it never frightened me. It was nothing that felt threatening or frightening for me. But at the same time, I didn't know what it was. It just felt natural to me. So as I grew up and kind of got into my teenage years, I still had these experiences that became a little bit less through the teenage years. Because I think that at that time, you're busy growing and developing and, you're with friends and school and such like. But then probably into my later teens, it came back again, much stronger and just more often, I would say. And I decided, I need to start looking at this. Now, I had always followed mediumship. I was always interested in mediums from the age of 10 or 11. I remember reading books and things. And my grandmother used to talk about mediums in a sense, and she used to do tea leaf readings and things. But aside of that, I didn't really know why I was drawn to it. So at that point in my late teens, I started to think there's definitely something else going on here. And I started to kind of look into it more and then ultimately ended up just developing it, coming into touch with the right people who kind of helped me get into a development group and just really started to sit with that. And when I did, it just felt like I was home. It just felt like everything in my life then suddenly started to make sense. And I've worked with it ever since.
That's wonderful. Would you say that people who become mediums or psychics are drawn to those things early on, like you were, like the books and the movies and metaphysics and that sort of thing?
I would say predominantly yes, but not everyone is. I think that sometimes people do come into it a little bit later, maybe when they've had a certain life experience or something's triggered something within them to kind of go looking in that area. Because we're not always conscious really of where our pools are. Like, so even I know that there's some mediums that I've spoken to before that really didn't become aware of it until they were maybe in their 30s or 40s. And then it happened very quickly for them. So it really, I think it depends when we have that kind of awakening within ourselves or that knowledge to think, right, there's something else at play here, or there's something that I need to investigate.
Hmm. Yeah, I've had that experience too with talking with different clients that it can come on at different times. And then, there are some that have had it since childhood and have been interested in the books and the movies and metaphysics and that sort of thing as well. I like it that you talk about like you had these things as a child. So, can you share some of the experiences that you had as you were growing up?
I think mainly it was where I used to see people, predominantly in my grandmother's house, but there were other experiences at home where I would just know things or see, like I remember seeing this girl that always seemed to pass at the top of the stairs, and there was things I would say to friends, even when I was as young as maybe 10. I would say, "Oh, I see your grandmother beside you, or, I would give them messages from the other side. But my youngest memory is when I was about 3 or 4 years old, and typically, I don't have a memory of that time as such. Like, I don't remember things that were happening in my household or certain memories of Christmases or anything like that. But this one memory stays with me where I was on a bus with my mother and I was looking out the window. My nose was pressed up against the glass, I remember. And we passed a cemetery, like a graveyard. And I looked at it and I said to my mum, "Why are all these people there?" And she just kind of looked at me as if to say, she was blank, like she didn't really have an answer. She couldn't see anyone. And I remember the thought coming into my mind of, I wonder if I'm buried in there. And that was at a really young age, 3 or 4 I was at that time. So that's one of my youngest and earliest memories of it. But obviously, even looking back as a teenager, I wouldn't know what that meant. I just remember feeling that and going through it. And other things were like seeing people in my grandmother's house, and I used to tell her, there's a man in the kitchen, and she would say, "Oh, the dead don't harm you. Don't worry." And she just always seemed to see it within me, and she would tell my dad, Karen brings the spirit in with her. And so she recognized it very early on, which kind of helped me normalize it in some way.
Yeah, how wonderful to have your grandmother's support and how she saw it and normalized it for you because a lot of people can experience the opposite. Was she a medium or did she have abilities?
She certainly did have abilities. She didn't ever put herself out there as a medium. She was, I think, quite known just around her community as having healing hands. Like she was very good at kind of laying her hands on someone and making them feel better or kind of remedying something. So I think she was really quite known for that in her close people and community. And she read tea leaves, of course. I remember watching her again, as a young child. I remember being in her kitchen and she was saying to the women that were at the table, turn the cup 3 times, and then she would read the tea leaves. So she did things like that, but she never really put herself out there as a medium. But her sister did. Her sister was a medium, now working as a medium. And I learned that kind of later in life as well, kind of accidentally, by mentioning her name and then funnily enough, she was very connected to the people that I became connected to when I first started. So yeah, she did work as a medium, so it was in the family.
Wow, that's so interesting. And how do you feel about that, like learning it later? And did your grandmother teach you the tea leaves? Did she teach you anything that you remember when you were growing up?
She did, yeah, she didn't really teach me the tea leaf. She didn't go into it in that sense, but I think because she would say things to me when I was having experiences, it kind of just made me feel understood. And it was almost like it didn't need to be said. It was just an understanding. And when I found out about her sister, it was when I first started going out to work as a medium, a local medium kind of took an interest in my work and said, "You're going to come out working with me," and took me under her wing a little bit, to do a platform work with audiences. And it was just in a general conversation one day that I said, "Oh, my aunt, my dad's aunt was a medium." And this was her name. And she said, "Oh," she said, "she was my best friend." And her and I used to go down to the Arthur Findlay College together, which is a spiritualist college in London that's worldwide known, as a college for mediumship. And so there was a strong connection to her, which I found so interesting. And I remember feeling like, oh, okay, so I've been guided to this person, or this person was guided to me to take me under her wing. So it kind of showed me like spirit are always at play. There's always an influence from those on the other side.
That's wonderful. And how wonderful to be guided like that and to find such a mentor and be able to move on from there. That's beautiful. When you were a child and then as you were developing your skills, did you see spirit all the time or was it a situation where they just popped in?
It was more that they popped in. It wasn't an everyday thing. It was just as and when. It was quite random, actually. So I could never say like I was in touch with spirit all of the time, but I was aware of things. I remember many times, and my sisters and I have spoken about this because we used to share a bedroom, where I would be just drifting off to sleep at night, and I would feel a spirit tugging the covers from me, and they would pull the covers, and I would kind of fight back to keep the covers. And it was like a tug of war. It felt like that to me. It was really quite intense. And then eventually I would kind of win and I would have the covers over me. And it was just, it wasn't that it pulled the covers off of me, it was just this pulling sensation. And that happened often at night times. And other things happened as I was kind of getting into bed, into that routine where I would pick up on people being in the room and things like that. But apart from that, when I was out at school or out with friends, I didn't see them all of the time, just now and again.
Nice. When you were a teenager, did you ever share anything that you received with your friends?
I did. And funnily enough, I didn't realize how much. Like, I think when you're just going through that and it's normal to you, you're just kind of being you. But years later, I met an old friend from school, and I'm talking like 20 years later. And her and I got chatting, and I said to her, are you surprised at what I do? Because she had mentioned, oh, I seen that you were doing an event, at a certain place. And I said, oh, are you surprised at what I do? And she kind of looked at me and was like, no. She said, everyone at school knew that that's what you were about. She said, I don't know if you recall messages that you would give people or certain things you would say. And when she said it, it kind of jogged my memory a little bit more. But for me at the time, it was just an everyday or an every week thing. It wasn't like I was thinking about it too hard. So when she told me that, it kind of reminded me, actually, I was. And I actually spoke to another lady, just another friend of mine from years ago, just a few weeks ago, and she'd said to me, oh, do you remember when we met, which was like over 35 years ago? And she said, you told me this and this and this and this. Now, I had no recollection of it. I didn't recall saying it to her. I didn't remember any of it. And she said, and it was so accurate, and this is what happened. And she had the whole story. And I thought when I left her that day, I thought, wow, that was over 35 years ago. And if somebody asks me about my mediumship, I can't put a timestamp on it. But obviously, it's always been there and it's something that I've always done without recognizing.
Wow, that's incredible. And so neat that you were able to pull through and you felt comfortable enough to, it sounds like, share with your friends when these things came up. So you spoke about working with a mentor. So what was this experience like, and how was she able to guide and help you into your mediumship practice?
In the beginning, she was, like, say, a local medium to me. And at that time, we used to do it like in the UK or in Scotland, they have a lot of spiritualist churches. So she would be serving the churches on platform, which is an audience reading. And she just used to take me along with her to get a bit of experience, get me up there speaking to people. And it really mattered to me. It meant a lot to me because at that point, was unsure. I was sure of what I was receiving, but I was not confident within my mediumship ability because I didn't really know what was happening as such. Like, you've got to learn to build your mediumship and you've got to develop it to a point where you know what's happening or you know what the communication is. So in those early years, her taking me under her wing really gave me that. But it wasn't with her too long. It was just in the first maybe 6 months of me working with the public. After that, I started to seek out my own tuition and development, and it was the Arthur Findlay College in London that I went to for that. And then it was expensive to go there. You had to pay for residential courses, and I wasn't in a position at that point to be able to really afford too much of that. By this time, I had young children. So I applied for a scholarship that was happening at that time, the Gordon Higginson Memorial Scholarship. And Gordon Higginson was a well-known medium in the UK, and he was the president of the Spiritualist National Union for 26 years. And so they were holding this scholarship in his memory. So I applied for that and I won that. And then I was able to do 3 years further development and study at the college, which I feel is what gave me my real grounding of my mediumship and real understanding of it.
Wow, that's wonderful. You said the words build mediumship and develop mediumship as two separate things. Can you share like the difference between the two and what they are?
Well, I think building your confidence within your mediumship is vital, understanding the foundation of what's happening because we are all spirit in human form. We are all spirit. We all walk this earth in human form. So you've firstly got to acknowledge and understand that there is that spirit part of you that connects to the divine, it connects to the higher source. And when you understand your connection, so the human side of you to your higher self, which is the spirit part of you, it kind of gives you that understanding of there's so much more going on than what the human brain can fathom or function with. And once you start to build the confidence in that, then you can start to develop yourself. So development means, understanding what your outlook is, understanding that we are spiritual beings, understanding there is a connection to the higher source at all times. And then within your mediumship, bringing that into it to develop your mediumship, which means understanding where your communication comes from, understanding how the communication works, because I think a lot of people don't understand how the communication is working through them. Like you are just like a vehicle for that communication. You're just a conduit. So it's understanding that you're part of it, but you're not all of it. And so developing that takes time as well. Developing your language with the spirit world, your communication languages, your communication styles, how they will work through your brain, number one, your mind, and your physical being to bring the messages for you to interpret them. So you have to kind of develop that over a period of time.
Wonderful. How does that show up for you, Karen?
The communication part of it, do
Yes,
you mean, or just the whole thing?
the
The
communication part of it.
communication. So for me, yeah, so the communication for me comes in all ways, hearing, sight, feelings, all the clairs that you hear people talking about, clear sentience is clear feeling, clairvoyance is clear seeing, clear cognizance is clear knowing, and clairvoyance is clear seeing. So you've got all of the clairs, if you like, and clear audience, I should have said, clear hearing. So you've got all of that going on all at once. So when spirit communicate with me, they might show me things, they might let me hear them at the same time. I'll definitely feel them. My mediumship works a lot on feelings of the spirit person and feelings of what they're showing me. And I just kind of have to interpret all of that all at the same time and work with it. And then when I bring that forward, verify that to the recipient.
Nice. Thanks for sharing that. I think that's really helpful. And also, what are some tips that you could bring our listeners if they're interested in doing this, figuring out how they work in mediumship or their psychic abilities? What would you recommend that they do?
I think the biggest thing is building that foundation for yourself first. So I talk about this quite a lot within my work and teaching. I think when you get to know yourself first, meaning like I'm quite a self-critical person. So for instance, when I first started working with my mediumship, I used to think, oh, that wasn't good enough, or I didn't get enough, or I could have done that better. And these thoughts would come into my mind, and I struggled with that initially because it then kind of devalued what I was getting from spirit because I would always feel like it wasn't good enough. So I then had to work on my personal development with that and the understanding that, Karen, that's just the way your mind works. Karen, you're always going to be hypercritical of yourself, or you're always going to strive for more because that's how you are and that's how you tick. So understanding that human side of me, that side where the mind's kicking in, allowed me then to surrender more to the spirit side of me. So when I was communicating or working with mediumship and these thoughts would come in, I was able to say, oh, that's just Karen being Karen. And it allowed me to surrender those thoughts and observe them. But that comes as a result of building that foundation with yourself first, getting to know yourself, then getting to know how the spirit world are coming in. And one way I would recommend everybody to do this is to do a little bit of meditation as often as you can, practice. You're building that kind of muscle. It's like going to the gym, you're kind of strengthening yourself. But going into that quiet place with your higher self first allows you to feel spirit. It allows you to feel the connection to the higher self, the guides, the helpers, if that comes in time. So giving yourself the quiet time, this life is very, very busy. It's very noisy, it's very busy, it's very fast paced. But we really do have to slow things down in order to feel the spirit because it is very subtle.
Nice. I love that advice. For those of us in the US, we don't see very many spiritual churches around except for in specific areas. If we don't have something like that around, what would you recommend would be, something that would be similar?
I would recommend sitting within a group, so maybe if there's two or three people that are interested, like, or you have friends that would be willing to support you, to sit with you, maybe like doing once a week, every 2 weeks, something like that, kind of allowing time, an hour or two, to just sit, put a little bit of relaxing music on, talk about spirit or talk about how you're feeling with your experience of that, and really just then building upon that because although I, attended churches and went to churches, my learning was done at home. My learning was done in a home circle, is what we call it here. So that was just a group of us. I think there was 6 of us that would sit every week at the same time and just sit, ask Spirit to join us. We would say an opening prayer. Spirit would come, we would ask Spirit to come in. We would share the experiences of what we were feeling. We would, try and get the communication going, and we would just practice that every week, week in, week out. So it doesn't need to be in a church, it doesn't need to be in a centre. You can actually do it within your own home. I would say maybe, find out about it from a teacher if you can, or someone who's got the experience of it, because spirit will work with you. It doesn't mean that you've got to be at a certain level or that you have to have experienced teaching or classes. They will work with you, but just to get that extra bit of advice or experience from someone, if there is someone you can ask. If not, it's just back to basics, sitting for spirit, asking them to come in and help you with it.
That's so interesting. And I was thinking that exact same thing this morning because a girlfriend and I went on a walk yesterday and this topic came up. And I had considered over the last couple of years starting a development circle. And then she was talking about development circle and what that would look like. And, you know, is it something that you do in your home or something that you find a space? Because I know you have to build the power with the group, and I like the advice of once a week or every 2 weeks so that power can be built. And then also your advice for looking to someone, if someone that's listening is thinking about starting a group, to look to someone who has maybe done that before or has authored a book possibly on running a development circle, for sure, maybe for assistance. What is it? Because I want to get back to spiritual
Yeah.
church because I haven't had the pleasure of being able to go to one. What is that experience like?
The churches I feel are a good space to welcome people in. So the spiritual there's centres and churches here in the UK. So the churches are usually the spiritualist churches, Spiritualist National Union, SNU. And so it kind of belongs to that body, if you like. And that's more of a divine service. You'll get a divine service on a Sunday, and then you'll maybe get a demonstration of mediumship on a Thursday. And there's lots of philosophy spoken about. The working medium will give philosophy from inspired through spirit, comforting words, because not everybody's going to get messages, not everyone's going to get communication, but it is a space where everybody gets something from it. So it is a really nice space to be in. And it's the same with the centre. So like the centres are probably not spiritualist because spiritualist is more of the religion side of things. So these centres are spiritual. So basically, it's the same idea, but it's not to do with the churches. But either way, these places are spaces for communication and spirit. I tend to say that, there's not as great a standard in the churches and centres now that there once was. And I feel that that's more because everything's so fast paced now and everyone's getting told, go on a 6 week course and then you're a medium or, just go up and try and see what happens. And that's really about them not understanding how the spirit world work. So I would like a better standard to be in some of these places, but nevertheless, it's still a space that's opening its doors for people to come in and join and be part of a community, which is really amazing as well.
Yeah, it really would be, Karen. And it's too bad that that's happening. And maybe that's something, that can continue to grow as people are looking for different things now that the world's a little wonky and, topsy-turvy. Maybe, they'll kind of settle into maybe searching or looking for something a little bit more. Um, Going back to spiritual development, Arthur Findlay College, what do you think that you learned there that you wouldn't have been able to learn anywhere else?
That is a really good question because I feel that when I started doing my learning, my development, what my main goal was to understand what this was so that if I work with it and people ask me questions, then I have valid answers. And what I learned through doing that, I had plenty of knowledge that I picked up along the way from the college. Um, but the biggest thing I think I learned was I already have this within me. Mediumship's very unique to every individual that works with it. So when I started to go, I thought I was going more to like learn from the teachers and see what they did and they would be able to help me. But then the learning came in that no, this is about you being you and nourishing yourself in your mediumship. So it might be different to the teachers. And actually, the teachers that I looked up to at the college, namely Paul Jacobs, Simon James, Brian Robertson, people that are aware of the college will know these names. Mavis Patilla, all of these teachers at one point or another told me, just go and work because, you've got it resonates within you and you know what you know your own knowledge basically. And that was a big learning curve for me because I've always been someone that wants to look up to someone else or wants that mentor or wants to say to someone, am I doing that right? Especially at the beginning. So a big part of the learning was listen to yourself and trust your mediumship. And that took a little while for me to kind of get going with that because as I would see myself as a student, which of course I was, but me thinking in the terms of this world, I'm a student and these are the teachers and they're going to know better. It doesn't work like that. It's more about you exploring your mediumship. So I think I learnt knowledge. Yes, I always will look up to these teachers still to this day. I do. I'm in touch with Simon and Brian a lot. They're based in Canada. If anybody's listening and in the area, excellent teachers. And I just feel like you've got to embrace your own everything of your own that resonates with you. That's the biggest learning curve.
God, that's actually wonderful and beautiful that they were able to hand you your personal power. Because so often we can get into situations, not necessarily like in Arthur Finley or other schools, but in our everyday life or situations where we're handing our power over to other people. And how beautiful for them to hand you your own personal power. I think that's amazing. Actually, I think that's wonderful. I'm curious, like as you do your work, do you work with guides or are you more claircognizant, clairvoyance or clairvoyant?
Yeah, I know some of my guides. I think that we all have a spirit team. There's more than one guide. You might have a main guide that you tend to build that relationship with through your mediumship, but there are many different guides that come in and out at different times. And I do believe that it's like being at school. If you're in year one, you'll get a year one teacher. If you're in year five, you get a year five teacher. And it's just the same as different parts of your life develop. And I'm talking about personally as well, because we have guides and helpers, all of us. It's not just mediums that have that. So we do have spirit teams or spiritual beings that will help guide us in life. And yes, you might get to know some of them, and I know some of my guides over the years of work, and I also sit for altered states mediumship. So I have learned through that and developed through that relationships with certain guides. But I don't know them all, and I won't know them all, and I don't strive to know them all. And I think that that's another thing that I see a lot of. People are like desperate to know who their spirit guide is. And I always tell students that work with me, don't be desperate for that. They will give you that information as it comes, as it's meant. And that's exactly how it's worked for me. I've been given information, names, evidence of certain guides, but it's came in little parts of information that then I've had to explore or get more development on or look for. And then I've gotten to know the personalities of the guides and helpers that are stepping forward. So it's a long process. But once when I work with my mediumship, as in doing a reading for someone communication wise, my guides and helpers are there in the background, of course, but they're not part of that communication. My communication then is directly with the mum or the dad or the cousin or whoever I'm connecting with.
Nice. If someone is beginning mediumship or beginning to work with their guides, and maybe this is two separate questions, What are some signs that they can look for to be able to work with the spirit guide or work for the disincarnate spirit?
So I would say that creating that relationship will give you the signs that they're there. Meaning, if you sit for meditation, for instance, and you kind of create this space, I do it as visualization, and the way that I used to do it was create this visual aspect of a room that I would go to in my mind's eye. And I would always go to the same room and I would put the intention there that, okay, I'm going to my room and I invite any guides to step forward, or I invite any, spiritual spirit connections to come forward. And I would kind of get to know the feeling of the connection. I wouldn't necessarily know the guide, but I would know the feeling, oh, someone stepped forward, or I can feel the blend with someone. And that is how I got to know when spirit were stepping out and in, so to speak. Um, you can ask your guides and helpers, your spirit team, for a sign. You can, or you can give them, you can say, okay, what if I say a blue feather would be my sign? Then see where that comes in. But I think the difficulty with that is that you're always going to look for it then. And I prefer things to be quite organic and natural and yes, active in a way that you're trying to build that relationship or ask for the signs, but not so much so that your mind is the one doing the work. Because if you employ your mind to do it, your mind will do it because your mind is there to give you answers. That's your logic. So you want to kind of be able to move the mind out of the way slightly and just surrender to spirit, and that they will bring the signs. And when you do get a sign, it will feel very real. You won't have anywhere to question it. Like your mind will still question it. Your mind will say, that could have been coincidence, or that's not really from the guide or the helper, or that's not really from spirit. But that's what your mind's job is to do. It's to make it logical. So moving that out of the way and going into the feeling of what happened is what's going to tell you that it was real because it will resonate within you on a different level.
Nice, I love that. If someone is thinking, gosh, how do I recognize a sign or a coincidence or maybe synchronicity or something like that? Karen, do you have some stories that you could share that would give examples of what you've experienced?
I mean, there's quite a few again, and when someone asks me that, I think, right, where do I start? But there's two that stand out for me. One was when my mum's in spirit now, but when she was here and we were going to the hospital for tests for her, as we walked down this corridor in the hospital, it was empty, which is unheard of in the hospital. It's a big hospital near us. And there was a £5 note on the floor. And I said to my mum, isn't that strange? And we looked around to see who does this belong to? Did someone drop this? There was not a soul. There was no one there. And my granddad, her father, used to bring us 5 pences. We all knew, oh, that's a sign from granddad. 5 pence, 5 pence. We all used to find them in random places after he passed. So my mum made a joke and she said, oh, maybe it's your granddad giving us £5 instead. Maybe he wants us to have a cup of coffee after the tests. So that's what we did with it. We went and had a cup of coffee afterwards. Well, 3 weeks later, when we were going for the result of the tests, we walked down the same corridor and in the same place, there was another £5. And I could not believe my eyes. My mum was shocked. And I said, that is definitely Grandad letting us know that he's there because that is just too unbelievable for it to be another £5. And unfortunately, she didn't get, the best news that day. So it was just his way of letting us know, yes, it's me. Yes, I'm here. And the other one that stands out for me was when, after my mum passed, we had bought her some tickets to see Barry Manilow because she loves Barry Manilow. And we'd taken her 2 years before she died and she absolutely adored it. So we had bought tickets for her to kind of gee her up a little bit, to keep her going, keep her positive through her illness. But she didn't make the concert. So she passed away in the February and the concert was in the June. So my sister and I decided we're going to go. Let's go in her memory anyway. So on the way there to meet my sister that morning, the radio came on in the car and the DJ was speaking on the radio and he had said, oh, I am about to speak to a very excited lady on the telephone. And I knew it was a message from my mum. And at the time, I turned to it, I was with my husband at the time, and I'd said, oh, this is a message from my mum. And the lady came on the line and he said, who am I speaking to? And she said, Catherine. And that was my mum's name. And he said, and why are you so excited, Catherine? And she said, because I'm going to see Barry Manilow with my two daughters today. Now, I know it was a different Catherine. I know it was a Catherine that was going to the concert with her daughters, but the very fact it came on exactly when it did, and with the surroundings that we were dealing with, we weren't sure whether to go. It was just the most amazing message. So these two examples for me are big examples, and they're quite, you can't deny them, even though some people would. But other signs that you can receive are like the five pences, the pennies, the feathers, the bird, the cardinal, the robin, whatever it is you're seeing that resonates within you and you know it's your person, just believe that.
Karen, those stories are amazing. And to have one show up the very next visit, just like, I'm here with you. That's phenomenal. That's incredible. And I'm hearing like naysayers. So, what would you say to someone who's still a skeptic, who doesn't believe, oh, I don't believe in this. This isn't true. It's just their imagination, whatever that, belief might be. What would you say to that person who still has a little doubt or a lot of doubt?
It's a funny one because I don't say anything. I feel that if someone's skeptical, then they're skeptical for their own reason. And over the years, I've had lots of people saying, "Oh, I don't believe that," or "How do you know that's true?" Or, "I don't believe in mediums." And it never offends me in any way. It never makes me want to persuade someone. I just feel that they're at that stage in their journey. And quite often it's not until someone loses someone or needs answers for something that they look deeper,
Mhm.
past the human experience. And so I really do feel that if someone is skeptical or they don't want to look at it or they're just not feeling it, then that's maybe right for them at that point in their life, and I don't feel that mediums kind of have any right to say to someone, well, I'm telling the truth and I'm telling you it's like this because I know. It doesn't matter. We all have a journey of our own, and we all come to different points in our life at different times. And it wouldn't be right for me to try and persuade someone. And likewise, I do get people that might come up purposely to say to me, "Oh, I don't believe in what you do," or I just think it's rubbish. And I say that's cool. That's fine. And I think sometimes people want that kind of argument, or they want you to react, they want to make their point. And I'm like, but it's okay, like it's okay that you don't believe, because I know full well that if they get through this whole life and they don't believe, that's still cool because they're going to know when they go over. But usually what happens is something happens where they have a loss of their own, or their own development changes, or their personal journey changes, and they will start to look for something else.
I love that explanation and perspective, Karen. Thanks for sharing that. And to the point, like, as you were like ending what you said, I always say the same thing. Like, I'm like, they'll see it when they get on the other side. But it is so true, like everything
Yeah,
that you said. And I
absolutely.
love that perspective because everybody has their own journey.
They do, and they're entitled to. Like I don't think it's anybody's right to make someone believe. It's the same with any religion. You wouldn't want, someone like my dad's family, for instance, were raised as Catholics, and my aunt. So my dad and his brothers kind of stepped away from all of that when they were a lot younger. But my aunt didn't, and that was her belief, and that was her faith, and that's how she lived her life. And she didn't like what I did. And she didn't like that my grandmother, who was her mother, believed in it. It was just didn't sit well with her at all. And she told me that on numerous occasions. I don't like what you do. I don't think you should be doing it. And I did try and have discussions with her because she was my aunt. And I was able to say to her, look, when you go out with your faith and your belief and you go to, because she used to go around like Gamblers Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous and try to help people with giving them faith. I said to her, it's the same thing. I'm doing the same thing. I'm just trying to give people faith that there's a God, there's a higher source, we're all from the same place. But she just refused. She just refused to see it. And at the time, my dad was very offended, I think. He was like, that's my daughter, and she's not going to tell lies to people. And I would say to him, don't worry about it. Like that she's allowed to have her faith and her belief, and that's okay. It's okay. And she passed away just a few months ago. And I'm still waiting to hear from her. And I'm hoping that I do, and I'm sure that I will.
Nice. I hope you do too. That's sweet. What are some of the benefits of, receiving a mediumship reading?
Well, people come for different reasons. So sometimes I think that people come for a reading from a medium because they want to know about their own life, but that's a psychic reading. That's a different thing. A psychic reading is where I would tune into the person psychically, which is all about their life, their guidance, what they need in this lifetime. That's a different kind of reading. But if people come for mediumship, they usually come when they've lost someone or when they're desperate to hear from someone that's crossed over, or it might be that someone's crossed over traumatically or unexpectedly and they didn't get a final goodbye. There's many different reasons. And I just think the benefit from the reading would be number one, the evidence that comes forward that their loved one is there, but also the peace that it brings. It brings the person in the spirit world some peace and healing too, because if they didn't get to say goodbye to their wife or husband or daughter or son, then if they get that communication, that makes them feel like they got to say what they wanted to say, but it also makes the person here understand that their loved one's okay. So there's a lot of healing that takes place through mediumship, and that's what it's for. As much as people talk about, proving life after death, yeah, you could put it like that, and that's fine. You're given evidence that they're still there, but really what's taking place is the healing. And that's the purpose of mediumship, is to help heal and to bring people peace and understanding about the truth of spirit.
Mm, I love that. And I feel that too. It's really the healing that can come from it because grief is so hard. And one of the things that we want is just to be able to connect again and to be able to have that connection is so beautiful and can help in the healing process too, because, our relationships aren't always that great. And I know healing continues on afterwards. Do you have anything that you would like to say about that? Like, as someone passes, the healing continuing still on the other side?
Yeah, it definitely does. When someone passes, a lot of people when they're coming to the end of their life, they are frightened sometimes, they don't want to leave their loved ones behind. And obviously, I know when they make that transition over to spirit, they are aware of where they are. I know that people talk about earthbound spirits or people that are stuck in the in-between. It's not something I really believe in that sense. I know that when we go home, we go home. Now, it might be that the person's carrying a lot of emotion, though, and they've still to work through their emotional kind of turmoil in that sense. That's a different thing. But that's where the healing really can help both sides. But like when I sat with my mother when she was making her transition over to the spirit world, uh, we knew for like 3 days before, like she can go any time. And up until on the day, both my sisters were saying, I don't want to go back in now. I can't watch this. And I said, that's fine, because again, it's a very personal thing. It's a very personal journey. But I said, I'm going to sit with her until she passes. So I did. And I could feel her soul move. I could feel that she was on the move, and I could feel that she was making her transition. And I kept saying to her, just make the jump. That was the way I was wording it for whatever reason. I kept saying, just jump, mum, just jump. You're going to be fine. We are all okay. You don't have to worry about us, because I could feel that she was so attached to leaving us behind that she was frightened to actually go and leave her body. And I said it and I said it. And then when it happened, I felt her fill the room. Like it was almost euphoric for me. And I could feel her energy fill the room, that she was so excited and so thrilled that I've done it and I'm here and I'm still here. Like I could feel the communication coming from her, so much so that the nurses came in and said, "Oh, you do understand your mother's passed away." And I said, I was all like, "Yeah, yeah, she's done it. She's done it." And I think looking back, they didn't know I was spiritualist. They didn't know I was a medium at that initial stage. And I think they were thinking, I don't think she's understanding what's taking place. But then I explained to them, look, I'm a spiritualist medium. I know. And they were like, oh, okay, that's fine. And I was calling them midwives. I kept saying to them, you were amazing and, you're midwives. And then I realized what I was calling them. And then I thought that's because they take care of people in hospice at the end of their life. They're still in some way guiding that person home, or guiding people into the world, guiding people out of the world. It's a real privilege. So I know when we do go over, we feel it, we know it, we're aware of it. But sometimes we get connected to this earthly life that it's hard for us to actually go, which is another thing you'll hear people saying that they gave their loved one permission. And you'll hear a medium saying that, they got the permission from you and then they were able to let go. Because I do think that's a very valid thing.
Can you talk a little bit more about that and what some of the experiences that you've seen of people crossing over and what their life is like now?
In the spirit world, do you mean what their life's like in the spirit side of things?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I think a lot of people ask me that, what's my loved one doing now? And I don't know all the answers to that. I don't often get all of the answers to that, but occasionally when I'm doing readings, someone will I remember speaking to a younger male that had passed over through suicide, and he was telling me that he's helping other younger ones that are crossing over through similar circumstances. He's helping them understand what took place and helping them on the other side. And then other times I'll be told, that the mum in the spirit world that I'm speaking with is just in her lovely garden, and she'll love it because it's a world of thought. So you can create the world you want to be in because it's a world of thought. So, wherever that spirit person wants to be, that's where they are. But for sure, I do feel that there's different levels in the spirit side, there's different development, there's different learnings. But I do think we have free will. So, if you have someone that's crossed over and they want to play golf all day in their minds, then that's what they'll be doing. I do believe that they have the free will to choose.
I love that. When we cross over, we get to do what we love, and that free will continues on. I've had some downloads recently about us and our soul and crossing over and what that might look like and what our choices are, and that we do have free will on the other side to like choose which direction we want to go, if we want to keep incarnating or um, go back into consciousness itself or continue on. It's been very fascinating these days. I want to continue on with, spirit and communicating with spirit, and what are the different ways that we can recognize how spirit is showing up in our own lives? Like how they could be speaking to us.
I think a lot of times, we can hear things as in, you might, if you, let's say your father's in the spirit world and you might be questioning something, or you might be making a decision, or you might just be doing something day to day, and you'll hear your dad's voice in your mind and what he would say. And right away, you'll say to yourself, oh, that's what he would say. That's what I think he would say, or that's what I'm imagining him to say. But quite often it is him giving you that thought. And so you have to remember that they are a world of thought, and so they can't communicate in a physical sense. I mean, they can definitely make you feel physical sensations at times, but it's a world of thought. So I think if you keep that in your own mind, when you hear maybe a certain word, or you hear somebody shout your name, or you think, oh, that's what my dad would have said to that. So that's me thinking that. I think if we can move ourselves out of the way of it, we can soon realize that actually your dad in the spirit world will want to guide you with that decision, or he will want to give you his opinion. So the only way he can do that is through your mind. It's only through your mind that he can give you that. So that's how he's going to do it. So I think it's about moving ourselves out of the way in that analytical mind and just experiencing something. It's the experience that really we should be listening to. In other ways, like we said about signs and things, lights flickering, or taking a photograph and there's an orb on a photograph, and things like that, I think can give us signs that they're still there, but we have to be open to that. Our mind will shut us down quickly. Our mind will tell us it's rubbish, it's coincidence, it's not true, because the mind can't understand it. But we have to move past that and just be open to it.
I agree. I was thinking this morning before the episode of different things that have popped up in my life. I used to live in a house on a peninsula here in Washington, and there was a spirit there that I called Bob because I could just feel him there and feel him watching. And one day, my second born was in the bathtub while my older kids were at school. And he looks out in the hallway and he goes, Mom, who's that man sitting in the hallway? And I go, well, I call him Bob. You know, what do you see? What does he look like? And he just like looked and then kind of like got this thoughtful look on his face and then just looked down, and there was no further conversation. Now he's 26 and he's like, I don't know, Mom. I'm like, the child, that used to see spirit is going, I don't know, Mom, now, which is funny. I go, you'll see one day. It'll probably pop in again. Yeah.
hmm
So it's
hmm
really
But
interesting how
then
spirit, yeah.
children
Please
Children
go ahead.
under school age are, yeah, children under school age are very susceptible to seeing spirit because they've not shelved that sixth sense yet. So when we go to school, we develop five senses. We're all taught to develop the five senses. But the sixth sense, which is your connection to spirit, your psychic connection to your spirit, the spirit world, is still very much intact. So usually you'll hear younger children talking about seeing spirit, or they'll see spirit so much easier. And then as they grow and develop, they forget about it. They're getting into life and they're doing what they're doing. And my son used to he used to be frightened to go up the stairs when he was about 3 years old. He started to become really kind of reluctant to go to bed. Now, every 3-year-old can get reluctant to go to bed at bedtime, but it was particularly the stairs. And I said to him, what's wrong? And he said, the magic boy is on the stairs. And right away, I knew it was a spirit boy. And I said to him, oh, okay. I said, well, the magic boy just wants to come and play with your toys. But how about we sit down on the stair and we ask the spirit boy or the magic boy to only come when you're in nursery? And then you won't have to see
Mm-hmm.
him. And he's just wanting to look at your toys. So we sat together and we done a little thing. And I said, okay, magic boy, you can't come when Jaden's here, and I done it all like that. And he never mentioned it again because the spirit world will listen. They don't want to frighten anyone. They don't want to, dazzle anyone or startle anyone. So they do listen. But children are pretty susceptible to seeing spirit and at an age gone by. Like when I was younger, it was your imaginary friend,
Mm-hmm.
but it was never really an imaginary friend.
That's beautiful. And I love that. And thanks for sharing that story about you and your son. I think that's really sweet, that you sat down and talked. And I think it is important to know, like, if we sit down and talk to them, like, they will listen. Yeah. I get signs from my mom too. Like when she first passed, lights would flicker and things would happen to the TV. When my older son went through a time and, stayed here for a while, the TV volume went up and down as a sign that she was here. Like, hey, I'm here supporting you through what you're going on, which is really sweet. And then she likes to, the printer does this, just a one single round and then it's done. But it's always the sign. It's like, oh, Mom is here. She's messing with the electronics again. It's really fascinating.
hmm
Yeah.
Absolutely. And they will mess with electronics because energy can go near energy and make something happen. They can manipulate that. So that's why I think a lot of times you'll hear about lights flickering or electronics or TVs. And, it's because they find that, just that little bit easier, I think.
Yes, yes, yes. And I like the dreams. I'm a dreamer, so I have a lot of dream visitations and had a dream visitation just last night, actually. And I think it's because I was already in the energy of our interview and knew this was coming up, and that can happen with me. And, very much had my mother figure step in, and I was looking at Christmas items. And it's funny, it went from having like lots of little Christmas items to two really standing out. And I picked up one of the figurines, and it was like a set, like it was a pirate, which was really interesting because I don't really recall that my mom was really into pirates, but I knew that it was part of a set and it was really interesting. So,
hmm
having mom show up, and Christmas was always her favorite time of year. And, being able to have those dream visitations, since she passed has been really, really nice and comforting that she's still around.
Yeah, these dreams are amazing. And again, your dreams, when the spirit world come to you through dreams, it's because your mind is not at play. So it's easier for them to make that communication because when we go to sleep at night, our brain updates like a computer and the body sleeps because it needs to rest. But the soul is never at sleep. We never go to sleep in the spirit side of things. So we are with our loved ones. And so when the kind of the mind's out of the way and not active, then they can make that communication and you might remember it a little bit more.
Mhm. And I can be so busy during the day, like everybody else. We're so busy. And yeah, even in meditation, my mind can be busy. So it's really fascinating that, I can fully relax and my soul can commune with spirit on the other side while I'm sleeping and my body is resting. Yeah, it's fascinating. I had a couple other interesting things happen. With my mom, I was doing a psychopomp class and I asked her because she was around. I'm like, do you want me to help you cross over? Like, you don't have to hang over or hang on if you don't want to. And when I was talking to her, all of a sudden my body just, it was like I got a like ghost hug. The front of my body was just freezing to the point where I was like, ooh, like just going, like, just kind of like turned away from it. Like, okay, was she angry? She's like, and then pushing, or was that like a hug and then a goodbye? And then I had another situation where I was working on a client and my hand on the solar plexus, and she had an attachment of this little spirit girl that was around. But when it let go, it detached from the solar plexus and went through me and out, and it was freezing. It was freezing. And that was my first experience of having spirit walk through me in that way during session instead of just leaving, which was really interesting.
Yeah, there's definitely physical responses, like temperatures can change and, we can, because if you think about it, that's like if you think about your own auric field, that's your spirit emanating from the physical. And so when spirit are moving or moving near you or blending with you, you can definitely sense the changes.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, so interesting. Definite firsts for me, for sure. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience as we're coming to a close here? Something that we may have missed that you would love the audience to know about mediumship?
I think that the biggest thing that I can say is that mediumship is an amazing blessing and it's a privilege for me to do it and I never ever forget that. But I think the one thing that stands out to me is that people obviously look to mediumship to prove the life hereafter. So it's about proving that life continues, which is what it's there for, and you're bringing the evidence of that through your communication. But the biggest message from the spirit world, I feel, is about reminding people that are here in this world to live now. Because quite often, more than quite often, spirit will come forward when they're communicating and say, just live now. There's no time in the spirit world. Whenever you come here, whenever we are back together again, there'll be no time lost because there is no time over there. There's only time in this world. And they want us to live. They want us to live this human experience. They don't want us to stand still or be stuck or just grieve so hard that our own life just comes to a standstill. They want us to live. They want us to experience this because this life is very short, and none of us know when our time's up on this earth to go over there. But when we go over there, we will be back with our loved ones. We will be back in that experience because that's where we come from. So I think the biggest thing that people need to remember is that they want us to live. We're looking for them to prove life hereafter, and they're looking for us to live life here now. So I think it's a two-way street, I think.
Oh, that's so beautiful, Karen. And thank you for sharing that. It's funny, I always ask what a jewel of wisdom is to finish out the show. And that was such a perfect jewel of wisdom right there. Just beautiful and really something for us to remember as we live this life, right? That's awesome. Karen, how can people reach you or work with you?
My website is karendocherty.com. Everything's on there, readings, mentorships, online workshops, online events, and in-person events. It's all on the website at karendocherty.com.
Awesome. Karen, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to host you. Such a great conversation. And thanks for all the information that you brought through.
And thanks for having me. It's been amazing. Thank you.
It has such a fun interview. And thank you everyone for joining us. Again, I'm Liz Peterson and this is Raise the Vibe with Liz. And remember to get out there and raise the vibe, everybody. Have a good day.